Okay, so today we're going to talk about how Ionic can give Angular developers the like mobile superpowers, how it makes it really easy for Angular devs to go and build iOS and Android applications. So I'm Adam Stevenson. I'm a solution architect at SSW, and I also run the Queensland office. I'm the general manager of Queensland. I've been building Angular applications and .NET Core applications since both of them were in early beta. So we've actually got a couple of years of Angular 2 and Angular 4 experience now.
Almost a couple of years, yeah.
And so I specialise in building large-scale enterprise web applications. And as I said, I've kind of been running Fire Bootcamp now for, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years.
Someone asked us, well, how long have we been in Brisbane?
I actually opened so SSW is a Sydney-based company. It's been going about 25 years. Adam Cogan's is a regional director and the owner of the company. We've got offices in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Beijing, Canada, and a couple of guys in Belgium.
Yeah.
So what was the question?
How long have we been in here?
And then I moved from the Sydney office back to Brisbane because I'm from Brisbane about 5 years ago, I think. So I started in the Sydney office and then opened Brisbane 5 years ago.
So Steve-O convinced me to move up here about a year ago. I didn't really have to fight. I love being in Brisbane. So I've been here about a year. Spend a fair bit of time doing training, but spend a bit more, probably about half the time training, half the time kind of on client side, almost all Angular, for the last few years. So now it's pretty much all I've done. If we haven't been doing it, we've been talking about it. So, which is why we've kind of been heavy into the Ionic side as well. So hopefully we can share some of that experience, going around, not just like coding it, but also having the conversations like we'll have at the table today with people and seeing how they do things. So yeah, should be fun.
Should be fun. So who's actually used Angular? Nearly everyone. Awesome.
Which versions?
Oh yeah, which versions?
2.
1 and 2? 2? 4? 2 and up. Awesome. Who's used Ionic already? Ah, great. Which version? Oh, the latest. You're on the latest one? Excellent.
So who's got an Angular app in production in Angular 2 or higher?
Friday.
On Friday.
So close to finishing the first round of it.
That's pretty awesome.
And you guys?
Very early development stage. So yeah.
How early? First weeks, months?
In a couple of months, but we don't really have
Full time.
Cool.
If it was full time, it'd say probably
proof
couple
of
of weeks.
concepts.
Yeah.
That's
Cool.
what we have done.
Awesome. And I know, and we've kind of seen you guys have come along to a few of our events, so we know that you're also doing it. So it's good. So we're all kind of at a similar spot.
Yeah, awesome. And who's built something not in Ionic? Is anyone? Yeah. What did you guys do?
I don't want to.
They don't want to.
Yeah, I know. So I can't remember your name was. Lisa, what have you built something in before?
So early on when we started to look at mobile applications and specifically hybrid mobile applications, we went with a solution that's called Pro Mobile. And it's at the time it was very good because it allowed us to do a lot of the things that you couldn't do with just like having access to native functionality and stuff like that. So it's a Ruby-based framework.
Okay.
And does like native wrapping, similar to kind of what Ionic does. It doesn't have a very big following, so it's quite hard to if something goes wrong,
To find
to your own devices to work out what's going on with it. So yeah, it's not structured as well as what Angular is either.
Yeah.
So definitely when we started to look at what should we move on to, that was a really big thing to look at as to how we can
It's
structure.
mobile's hard. I just saw the way you put your hand up was like, and that's me.
It's really hard. And,
Yeah.
I found obviously using Ionic, it was fundamentally better in a lot of ways. It just made things so much easier. But then it has its
Its quirks as
things
well. Yeah.
as well, yeah. Especially moving over to a whole new Angular version too. I imagine there was things going on there. So I have a bit of an appreciation for both.
Yeah.
both.
But I think
yeah.
that brings up the question as well. It's like, because we have to do the same thing. We're consultants. We have to ship apps for people, and we've gone down the Xamarin road, which we'll talk about. And we still like Xamarin, but it's like, choosing something that's popular is actually a really big concern because, if it's not here in 6 months, or if we train everyone across the company in it, then and it's not a black and white decision. So it's been tricky for us as well.
Spend a little bit of time in Apory as well.
Mhm.
We actually got to a prototype quite nicely there. But the biggest concern with us is you don't have a proper way of doing versioning code or versioning of whatever you're doing. So everything, because the whole concept is everything's on the cloud, including the IDE, you cannot really branch out. You cannot really version it. So whatever is
For
that is what it
teams
is.
to work on it.
So it's really not for teams.
Yeah.
It's a really nice solution.
So everyone's working on the exact same live,
Yes.
and then you push it straight to something that's then shared.
If it is two developers working on the same file, you have a little notification saying someone else is working on it. So
Oh,
make sure
wow.
that person saved before you, and then you have to
It's a little
reload and
Yeah.
yeah.
It's made for single developers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not made
It's
for teams.
really simple to put an app together, like a
Yeah.
simple app together. It took me like maybe an hour just to do a simple login, put it on the API, put it in that local database, and use immediately Cordova plugins with it. 1 hour.
Oh,
Seriously,
great.
it was boom, boom, and the deploy is seriously easy because everything's on the cloud.
Yeah.
Nothing to install. at
Yeah.
all. But the massive down is version control.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about in general the enterprise mobile landscape. We're going to have a look at how easy it is to actually build an Ionic application leveraging your Angular skills. Then we're going to talk about shipping to the app stores and some of the challenges around that. And then about taking code reuse to the next level and how not only can we share our code between our Ionic app, our iOS app and our Android app, but how we can also share it with our web applications and get code reuse across all three. So the enterprise mobile landscape.
Yeah, so let's have a quick look at where we've kind of come from with being able to do a hybrid application or even just put code into a phone. So in '96, we saw the Windows CE platform came out and we had the Palm Pilot and things were kind of kicking off. And then Symbian came out in 2000 and that drove like Nokia for a long time. And then iPhones in 2007, and I think that's really when it all kind of changed for a lot of people being able to actually do something on their phone. And then we got Android in 2008, which has really changed. If you have an Android phone, you'll notice there's a big difference. It used to be really sucky. And then we got Cordova in 2009, which is what kind of really allows us to do this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on the phone, which we'll be talking about today. We got Angular in 2010. And I think some of these dates are interesting to see. Like we're talking, about 7 years here for some of these technologies and the changes through and kind of coming around that popularity kind of point about how long has some of these frameworks been around. Xamarin in 2011. And then one of the interesting ones, we got this from, who's heard of Telerik here? Yep, now called Progress. So you might hear us say Telerik or Progress. So they're a company that make lots of developer tools and kind of helper libraries. Like Telerik made this Icinium, which they've now gone down another road of launching something else. But they're a company that's done a lot in the mobile space, which are very interesting to watch. And we'll talk a little bit about. And then 2013, React came out, and there's also React Native, which is the way if you're a React shop versus an Angular shop, you can do something like you would with Ionic and write React code, and that compiles down to native mobile code, which is kind of interesting. And then we got Ionic in 2013, and that was interesting. I think it was really exploded when it came out and was hugely driven by community. And it had millions of installs now and is very popular. In 2014, Telerik or Progress, now called Progress, released native scripts. Who's heard of that? So native scripts is kind of like Ionic. You write it for Angular, but that one compiles down to native. But again, we talk mostly about Ionic because that's the one we're using because of the concerns around popularity. And then 2016, we got Angular 2 and Ionic 2. But as we already know, they're now Angular 4 and as of this year, and Ionic 3. It's a shame the versioning is a bit funny.
So, Ionic's not new. Like Ionic's been around since 2013. And there's heaps of there's heaps of apps that have been shipped on Ionic. There was a really big challenge with Ionic though, and Ionic, the original version of Ionic was built on the original version of Angular. And when the original version of Angular, when you're building anything big and complex, or when you're trying to run it on an underpowered Android device, it could be really slow. So inherently, a lot of people had performance issues with Ionic, or they had to do a lot of performance tweaking to get it to work right. But because the new version of Ionic is based on the new version of Angular, Ionic now is really fast because it's able to leverage all of the stuff that comes with Angular 2. And when the Angular team released Angular 2, they didn't want it to just be the best framework for building web applications. This is how they actually described it: one framework, mobile and desktop. So when they were building Angular, they were really focused on it being a great way to build mobile and desktop applications. And the two teams together work together really tightly. So the Angular team, what's the guy from the Angular team?
Mishko.
So Mishko, who actually wrote the first version of Angular, he actually went and worked with the Ionic team on their performance. So now there's this real symbiotic relationship between Angular and Ionic. So now the new version of Ionic gets all of those great performance benefits and productivity benefits that we get out of Angular 2. So it leverages Angular's speed and productivity. So you've got optimized code generation in Angular. So the HTML templates get turned into highly optimized JavaScript. There's server-side rendering, so the initial page load is really fast. There's code splitting, which is a really big deal. So in Angular 1, when you went to hit the application, it downloaded all of the JavaScript for the whole app. Now in Angular 2, it just downloads the JavaScript in chunks as you navigate around. Ionic leans on this code splitting really heavily, and they actually code split every page in the Angular application. So it actually only downloads it as it actually needs it. So the component model, so from a productivity point of view, actually composing the applications is really easy because the component model makes composing the application easy. The template syntax is simple and powerful. We've got TypeScript, so now we get compile time checking for our JavaScript. And we've got the Angular CLI in Angular. So we've got a command line tool that is really great at generating code for us. And what's even more important is for actually building our applications. So if you built an Angular 1 application, or if you built an early Angular 2 application before the CLI, you would have been familiar with massive build scripts to do bundling and minification and all that kind of stuff.
If you didn't have to do that, you're lucky.
And if you didn't have to do that, you're lucky.
Well, actually, you're probably smart if you're just coming to the party now.
Yeah, so you've saved yourself a lot of hurt because now it's just a single line and you get all of that out of the box, which is awesome.
And I think if you go back, I think this is also for us, this is kind of how we've ended up here, is that we've invested so much in being good at Angular that we get to use all of these skills for us. Like you guys have probably been thinking about, well, if we invest in Angular, then Ionic is kind of a good match because we're going to invest in learning to utilize all these things because you've got to spend the time to get your head around them. And then you can take all of them over, it's just one for one. For most of it comes straight over into your Ionic code.
It's awesome.
So if you write an Angular application, do you have to write a separate application to
Ionic?
convert it into Ionic?
So that's actually the last section of of the 4 sections. The whole last section is about how do we actually build an Angular app and an Ionic app and actually get code sharing out of that.
But you do literally build them separate because one's going to go on a device, has a completely different tool chain, completely different developer experience. You actually run it differently so it's a completely different project usually.
But essentially, but you can pull the business logic out, and that's what we're going to show is how do you get all of those combined models and business logic and services, Angular services, and share those between Ionic and your Angular app, so you get really nice code reuse.
But like you've used the CLI before for Angular, there's a CLI for Ionic. So basically, you would start a new folder, a new project, and you would say Ionic start, give your project a name, and you can choose a default like tabs or side menu or something, or blank if you wanted a blank one. And then you just change directory and then you serve it. So it's very similar experience as you would expect with doing a normal Angular application, which is great. And also the code generation is very similar as well. So in the CLI for Angular, you would just say ng generate, and it's similar Ionic generate, give me a page. But it's different that the concept of a mobile brings a bunch of different ways of thinking about Ionic versus you would a web app. Like a web app has bigger real estate with many more components. So you tend to think, okay, I've got a component router and I'm thinking about where my components go. But when you get a mobile, it tends to come back to the old way of thinking because you've got such a small screen, you tend to think, oh, I'm dealing with a page. And there's a little less complexity. One of the other reasons we really like it is there's something called Ionic View. So Ionic View allows you to do debugging across different devices really quickly. So this is an app that you can get from the App Store called Ionic View, both for the Apple and the Google Play Store. And basically you are able to install this and then send somebody, or they would install this on their phone and then they can just get an invite and they just press on it and all load the app in their phone. So that's one thing we found super useful with our clients is we don't have to go shipping or deploying anything. We just go Ionic upload from the command line. It just pushes it up into their service and they just download the app and then they can get an ID for the app that they want to load and then it runs on their phone straight away, both Android and iOS. So that's been great for us to get.
And if you guys want to install this app on your phone, you'll actually be able to follow as long as I code along the demo. You'll actually be able to run the demo app on your phone as I go along. Yeah. Our clients love this. So because it comes down to that Scrum and Agile process, our daily procedure is in our daily stand-up, we say, here's what we're going to do today. So when I'm working on my clients that are doing Ionic, I actually say, here's what I'm going to do today. And I work on the tasks I'm going to do. I code those tasks up. And at the end of the day, I send the product owner an email going, I check in the features that I've done. I do an Ionic upload, takes 90 seconds. And then I send the product owner an email going, hey, here's the features I've done. I record a little video and snag it and go, here's what I've done. It's available for you to play with now. So they're actually able to go, oh, he's put this in. I'll just hit refresh, get the latest. And they click around and go, looks great, looks great, looks great. Or can we do this a little differently? So it's that if you've done other mobile development, that story wasn't easy. If you worked with something else to get it through the store, clients love that. Mm-hmm.
Yep. The other big benefit that you get is you're going to be able to write it once and then it's going to style it for 3 different platforms. So here we've got an iPhone and then we could have an Android phone and then a Windows phone if you can find one. Anyone have a Windows phone? Am I safe to make Windows jokes? Okay.
Except me. I loved Windows Phone.
Yeah, our boss makes his wife still run an Android Windows phone. But you can, obviously most people we see doing iOS and Android, not many people are doing the Windows as well. But what you can see here is not only that it's easy to write it and it will do styling across the different platforms, that also the big part of the thing we like about Ionic, and one of the first things that we've kind of gone, wow, this is such an easy experience for us, is all of the widgets that you get from out of the box from Ionic. So here you can see an example of just some slider widgets that come from the Ionic team, and they're all going to instantly style to the platform without you having to do very much, even though you could override them if you want. So these widgets are a big thing for us because they're quite powerful. And coming as a web developer to Ionic, you're like, simple things, you're always shopping around for lots of different widgets from lots of different people. And, Ionic will just have an amazingly robust widget straight away for you, like something like this where you just want to swipe to the side and be able to then, get a select set of options. So that's one of the things that I've found using Ionic that I love straight away, is that you're just like, oh, it's so much just shopping around for things and trying to make it work across different browsers, because that's not part of the story. You just got to make it work across these different platforms.
And the nice thing about the widgets is they look different they're styled for iOS and Android. So if you put the widget on, I'll actually show you this in the demo.
Yeah, you can kind of slightly see it on there.
You can see it on here where the different widgets render differently on the different devices. They render however that particular widget renders on that device natively. If you're doing this in an actual just web application, it's a whole lot of work to try and make it look native.
And there's a bunch of different services that offer. So one thing that's really cool is that Ionic is completely free. Everything is open source, but they do have a bunch of services that you can opt in to pay for. One of them is authentication service. Another one is a deployment service. So being able to, because it's HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and Cordova plugins, But the deployment stuff, you're able to do real-time updates. So if you wanted to patch some of that CSS or update some of the HTML stuff, then you can do that without necessarily going through submitting again to the store, which is kind of crazy. And then there's also a package service they have where so the classic example for this is if you have a Windows desktop, a Windows machine, you're not going to be able to package for the iOS store unless you're on a Mac device, whereas this would allow you to package on their machines and get it ready for the store. So someone with a Windows machine could be running it just as a web app, then they can package it with their online builds in the cloud, and that would get it ready for the Apple Store. And then
which is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. And there's push notifications. And there's a couple of other new things they're working on, but these are kind of the main paid for things.
And I'm going to show you how to do the package stuff in the demo.
When you say paid for, how expensive is it reasonable?
We haven't actually used too much of the paid stuff
No.
yet from them.
And because that is the amazing thing, is it's all you can actually use Ionic completely for free, but we're not really using the messages or the deploy, and we're only just starting to use the packaging stuff. So yes, I'm not really. And
Set them up
the
for
other,
free. There is a free option of it. It will give you like 5,000 notifications, 600 deals or so, and then it is at $20 a month. I see for a lot more than that. And
See,
then
that's
you can
great.
customize how much you want.
so you guys are
planning to
using using the services. How are you finding it?
Beautiful, especially with packaging.
Yeah.
We all use Windows, and we only use the Mac for getting the certificates, getting the P12 certificates, the provisioning profiles, upload them, and that's it. You forget for them for a year.
Wow,
And
that's
then
awesome.
You need to renew them, but you still need a Mac because for being a developer, you need to
Yeah.
own an iOS device.
But you only need one. But you only need one Mac on the whole team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you put all the certificates or your provisioning profiles in there, upload them to the cloud, and literally just upload in there. The only annoying thing is you need to check all the time because it uploads, and then you need to check when it's going to be ready for you to download the IPA.
Yeah.
Which is usually 30 seconds. It's not
Yeah.
really that much.
Yeah.
But it's actually annoying that you need to manually check to actually get it.
Oh, there is a command line utility you can use.
But you still.
Oh, but you still
put it
need to
in
check.
there To check.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like you need to. They
Yeah.
might have something else that actually want to send you an email when it's ready or something.
Yeah.
I haven't gone there.
But you've got a
But yeah,
poll.
the deployment is quite nice.
Yeah.
So we should try to deploy.
You mentioned about having a Mac. Is it like Xamarin where you've got to have a Mac set to do the build?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the build isn't done in their cloud on their Mac, it's done on your Mac.
Well, you could, or
Mm.
like we're
That's the
saying.
packaging service.
So yeah, so you'd need to obviously have a Mac to create the keys and sign the keys to say to authenticate it, and then you can, once you've done that once and you upload that to their cloud, then you can build on their machines.
Okay, once you've got the key.
Yeah. So if you're not using their paid for services, it's the same as if you were doing either Xamarin development or if you were doing native Android and iOS development, where if you want to build for iOS, you need to have a Mac and you need to have Xcode, and you actually need to do the build on a Mac.
You've got to have a developer license.
And you've got to have a developer license, and you've got to build for Android. You've got to have Android Studio and all the Java SDKs and stuff installed. So you can do that, and you can do Ionic without using their paid for services, doing it the old-fashioned way. Or you can sign up for the package service, and then basically you make certificates. You put certificates up in their cloud, and then you just do it. And I'll do it. You just do an Ionic upload at the command line. It takes your code, pushes your code up to their server, and they build it and package it all up for you. And then you just download the files that need to be deployed to the devices. And it's very slick.
What are you guys using for your backend for your Ionic apps? PHP, and the database is a Postgres database. Okay.
Cool. Excellent. So what happens if you need an app? Now,
How do you end up deciding to use Ionic is the question.
how do you end up? And so just a reminder though, we're going to share all the slides, so you don't need to take photos and things. So we'll just tweet we'll give you the little slide deck. So how do you decide whether Ionic is right for you?
Oh, it's just a little bit off the side here. Let me just fix that for a second. Sorry, guys.
While you're doing that,
Go for it.
Is installing Ionic just an npm install?
Yeah, so installing Ionic is, I can't remember. Yeah, it's very easy. It's an npm install, a global npm install, so there's a couple. You need to install Ionic and Cordova. The Ionic docs are excellent. Yeah, so you need Node and npm. You need Node.
I would say some moderate configuration, you need to set up your Java environment, you need to run your studio environment. If you want to deploy, obviously, for Android,
Yeah.
test it live in Android, then yes. So it will say some model.
The
It's
deep-
not too complicated. It's
Yeah.
very well documented, but it's not as
Getting up and going the first time, yeah. Actually, getting the device debugging and stuff is more complex again.
Yeah,
But just-
there's
yeah.
definitely that boundary when you go to the device where you go to deploy is definitely a pain point still. I found you got to get your ducks lined up and then you're there.
I was already doing Xamarin development, so I'd already kind of had lots of the stuff pre-configured. And so for me, that's a whole other story. Anyway, I'll do that story after you've done the slide.
Okay. So here what we can see across the top is the different choices as we see it for what we had to decide between for SSW. So you got native, Xamarin for C#, React Native for React Code, Ionic, or a PWA. Who knows what a PWA is?
I don't know what it stands for, but
A progressive web app. So this is a way of being able to try and maximize just having a single web application running in the browser like a normal web app would, and trying to utilize as much of the device that web app's running on, like phone, or being able to do things. And then
Essentially, it's a HTML file with a manifest,
Yep.
and then
and a service worker.
and a service worker, and then that actually will run as an app on your device. It's kind of the way of the future.
the future.
The
maybe,
future,
yeah.
future, baby.
So you've got, and on the side you can see we've got cost, features, performance, code sharing, and the technology, whether it's native or not, on the side here running. So native is great. It would be the way to go, and we would all love to do it all the time. But as probably everyone here sitting, it's a big cost involved in that. So native is going to be great because it's going to be the best for performance. You get all the features. If you're going to build the next Facebook, or if you're domain doing their app for choosing real estate, then that would be a great way to go. You could hire 10 people on your Android team and hire another 10 people for your iOS team, and they can build completely different tool chains, completely different ideas and everything, and go that direction. But obviously that's got a cost. So for a lot of our customers, that's something you'd have to build the teams up also and have those specialty people. So that's obviously got a place as well, but not for what we're doing. Xamarin's great, especially if you've got a team of C# devs. You write C#, goes to native, gives you all the options similar. So you could go iOS, Android, and Windows, and you get some code reuse with this. So all of your business logic is going to be able to be shared across those. Some code reuse as well from views. I haven't actually used Xamarin, but you have.
Has anybody else used Xamarin?
Tried.
You tried?
Yeah, we tried, and we saw how much it's gonna cost us.
Yeah, I've got some scars. you
A little when it was first coming out before
Yeah.
Microsoft bought it. I didn't play with it.
Yeah, look, it's if you've got a C# team, my kind of position on this is I'm an enterprise web expert. Like I ship large scale web apps, and I thought I could go into Xamarin because I write a lot of C#. Like I do a lot of back end, and it was in stuff that I knew. I know C# and I know XAML. I did Silverlight. I thought this is my baby. I can ship mobile apps now cross platform. Awesome. But what I worked out is you're not a web dev and a Xamarin dev. Xamarin's a real specialty, and we've got a lot of friends we've got guys in the company who do it, but it's not something that you tinker with. And that's probably why we're so excited about Ionic, is it fits in exactly with our tool chain. So we're shipping stuff awesome. If you put a full team together of Xamarin guys, they would be, they can build great apps. But it's a real specialty.
So then the other option is React Native, which we mentioned before, which would be, if you're a React shop, would be a great way to go. And interestingly, all three of these run native on your device. I think that's the thing we're really saying here. Versus something like Ionic, which is more a hybrid approach. It's running that CSS and HTML and JavaScript in the browser-like environment on the device. It's not compiling down to being pure native.
So I might just recap. So the difference between native and hybrid is that in native, like with Xamarin, you're actually building a user interface, and whether it's in C# or it's in React Native, you're writing a React user interface, or in Xamarin, you can either do it in C# or in XAML. But when it actually gets compiled, it's actually getting compiled down into the same executable code that runs if you were to create a native app in iOS using Xcode, or for Android using Java. It compiles down to the real native bits. But when you do hybrid apps like Ionic, what it's doing is it's actually running a lightweight web browser that then is running the code that you write, and it's then packaging that up into a shell that then gets deployed out to iOS and Android. So it's not running exactly the same. So the downside of that is that they're, and is that the performance isn't necessarily quite as good as running a full native app.
Yeah.
As a hybrid app, does it have access to the phone's
So,
other
yeah, so
devices?
through Cordova plugins, then you can access the phone or your contacts or anything that you would be able to access.
Contacts, map, camera, phone, all of those there's plugins for all of those interactions, but it's not fully native, it's coming through Cordova.
And there's a bunch that the Ionic team say these are our official Cordova apps that we support out of that box. And then there's a PWA or progressive web app. So that would be, like we said, just running pure HTML, pure web app. And that's going to give you 100% code reuse. Performance can be okay. And I guess the features there of saying none's not really true. I guess it could be really what we're saying here is that it's, because it's got a big cross browser, they just load it in whichever browser their phone loads for them. Then Safari can be a real deal breaker. So Safari really are not, aggressively being as up to date as Chrome. Whereas if everyone was running the same feature set for doing a progressive web app with Chrome, then I think it would be a real story. But for us, there's still so many things that we can't do. And also styling can be, if you've had the luxury of spending months trying to style a web app down to work like a mobile app on a mobile phone, it actually can be a real pain in the butt going cross-browser. Trying to make the CSS exactly the same is actually quite tricky and still quite an investment. So for us, we have really kind of gone, Ionic is way, way, way easier and gives us way more features than trying to go down the progressive web app path. But I think as we probably get more comfortable, because I think progressive web apps are becoming easier to do in Angular, we'll probably turn on those things as they're easier to turn on and start to invest a bit more in them. But at the moment, we don't do too much with them.
The real catch with them is that mobile Safari doesn't support progressive web apps. So that's why we don't use them at the moment. And it's almost like Apple had some invested interest in not supporting progressive web apps. So pretty much progressive web apps don't run on an iPhone very well. And it's because of the browser that's on the iPhone, because Apple's got very little incentive. It's almost like a competitive. They want you to get an app from the App Store, not to be able to just load it from a web page.
But it would be interesting to see if it changes in time.
Pressure.
Safari's become the new Internet Explorer, but there's some things like if you're into Polymer, which is another library from Google, they've got this web component standard, and Safari is now up to date with that. So maybe it'll change. Maybe Safari will. Maybe. We'll see. We'll find out. So if we were to kind of roll through the 4 different choices, I think everyone wants to choose native, but as we've seen, it becomes a self-limiting thing with terms of resources. Xamarin's great if you have C# specialists for it, and then React Native is great if you're going to be a React shop, or you're going to have a React team. And we really feel Ionic for us is definitely the choice, being such a heavy Angular shop. We can get any of our devs who have done Angular 2 or higher could just be dropped onto a team and start writing and adding value pretty much straight away, which is a huge win for us.
And I think everyone I know whose experience with Ionic has been the same. If they've already known Angular, you already know Angular, then you create your Ionic app and you're like, oh wow. Yeah. It's just Angular, but with some different view, with some extra view stuff. How cool is this? I just built an app. Wow, it's running on my phone. Like the experience is excitement. Like the first couple of days, you're like, oh, that's awesome. And now you just bust out features. Like having done the Xamarin is very good if that's your bag. But we build enterprise web apps. So we do, especially if you're doing forms over, and this is the whole, when you're talking about the performance, if you're going to build a game, if you want to build the next big multi-million-dollar game, you want a native app. But when it comes down to performance, nearly all of the enterprise web apps we build are some kind of collecting data, some kind of storing data, some kind of retrieving data and showing that data again. The performance and everything you want is awesome for that using Ionic, and you essentially get it for free. So that's why for us, it's just a no-brainer. That's why we think it's so awesome.
I found like another plus for Ionic too, especially over React, was again it's a framework.
Yeah.
React is a library.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that underlying structure. that forces you to write good code.
Yeah.
So that was another big thing. When I was looking at the different options, was just that underlying structure that it has.
That's a really good point. You go onto most people's Ionic project or most people's Angular project, if you pull it down off GitHub, and it's all looking very similar. You're not going to jump in and some devs recreated their idea of how
Exactly
MVVM works or something. Yeah, it's a good point. So, in summary, it's built on Angular. It's great for enterprise. It's the easiest way to ship a mobile application if you are an Angular team. And I think we've kind of given you our view of why we've gone down this path. It's been pretty simple for us. We've tried the Xamarin path and we've kind of turned around after a couple of hard, difficult wins.
Scars. I've got scars.
Yeah. But I think we're going to take a break before we do the demo.
Let's grab some. So we've got food. We've got Vietnamese bread rolls, Vietnamese rolls, and like some Subway dips and things. So if you guys want to help yourselves.
And then we'll come back and we'll do a demo.
So, Phil will come back and I'll actually I'm going to build an app. So what I'm going to run through now is I'm just going to go and do the new project in Ionic and call out some of the things I really like Ionic and just kind of give, like you guys have already, obviously you'll be on this, but the guys who are more Angular guys, this is the new project in Ionic experience. And if you've already written Angular, it should feel really familiar. But it's why we really like it. So what I'm going to do is just go and do the beginnings of a very simple CRM app. Particularly if you've done the Angular CLI, you'll be familiar with when you start a new Angular CLI project, you go ng new and your new project name. Very similar in Ionic. So I'm just going to go Ionic start, and I'm going to give the project a name. So I'm going to call it the Fire Bootcamp CRM. And then I choose a template. So I'm going to do the side menu template, which will just out of the box give me a new project that's got a side menu. So that's going to go out and that's going to go and create the project. It's going to go and download all of the NPM packages I need. Not running code already. So that'll go and do that. If you're going to do Angular development, we highly recommend using Visual Studio Code. We use Visual Studio 2017 for all of our C# development because we think Visual Studio is awesome for a full-fledged IDE. But as much as we love it, and I love ReSharper, Visual Studio Code for doing Angular is just magic, especially when you install John Papa's collection of extensions, which is called
Angular Essentials.
Angular Essentials. And that kind of gives you IntelliSense. It gives you, like IntelliSense, not just, it gives it in the HTML as well as in your TypeScript.
There's a good Cordova debugger.
Oh, there's a good, I don't have that one. Oh, cool.
If you're emulating onto the phone. You do most of the debugging on the view, but if you debug on the phone a lot, then the Cordova thing's really nice. Oh, breakpoint. Yeah.
Nice.
Just plug your phone in the side. It's not too hard to configure.
That's awesome. So it's come straight up to me and it said, so I've just gone in, I've just created my Ionic project and it's straight away coming and saying to me, do you want to link this app to your Ionic dashboard? So I've logged in here to Ionic. So I just went to the Ionic website and said, I'll create an account, and I've gone and logged in here. You can see I've got a couple of versions. I've already got two. I wonder if that name's going to go that way. I've already got two practicing. I've got a few demos in here already. But this is the dashboard of my Ionic applications from when I log into the Ionic portal. And what it's saying here at the command prompt is, do I want to now go and link this project that I've created locally on my machine up with their site? And what this is going to give me the ability to do is to upload my code from my local machine up into their site so that then I can download it into the Ionic View app or start using it with their Ionic services, like their build services. So I'm going to say yes. And all that really does is takes me to that same screen. So then I come in here and I go Ionic link. So I should have come in and gone Fire Bootcamp CRM. And then I come in here and I can go Ionic link. and then it's going to look up the list of apps. So it's giving me a list of apps that already exist up in that portal. And I can say, go and create a new app. So this is going to create a new app. Sorry. That just takes me to the portal. Then I have to come in, I have to create the app. So I'm going to create Fire Bootcamp BNE for today. And I create in the portal. Once I've created that in the portal, I'm going to run ionic link again. Oops, sorry. That's what I was doing wrong. So when I run ionic link, what I should do is I create the app in the portal, then I go through and I choose the one that I'm linking it to. And see the string of numbers and letters after it, that ID there? That's really important. You'll use that a lot. So that's gone through, and if we went and had a look in our project, so I'm just going to open up Visual Studio Code. So it went through and it created my project in Visual Studio Code. So when I created the project, this is what it created. If I come in here and I have what that command did was in my Ionic config, it went and put this app ID in. And that app ID is associating this project here with this, see the app, that's the app ID there for Brisbane. So that's how it associates the two together. So I can actually just go and run that application now. I can go and run Ionic Serve, and let's have a look at just what I get straight out of the box. So just like in Angular, it's compiling the application down. It's firing it up in the browser. Now, so we use Chrome, and I can go into the Chrome DevTools. When I go into the Chrome DevTools, oh, you don't have it on by default. I've got to go in here and choose the mobile view, toggle mobile view. So the nice, and I'm going to just change Duncan's tools to be over the side. So I'm just going to mess up your play with your machine. So what's nice about the Chrome debug tools is I can say, show me this Ionic app as if I was a Nexus, see the Nexus 6P? So now it's showing me what it would look like on an Android phone. If I wanted to see what does it look like on an iPhone, I could come down and say, let's show me what it looks like on an iPhone 5. So it gives you an idea of what that screen is going to look like on particular form factors. I could go in and say, what is it going to look like on an iPad Pro? So I will often go and click around my different screens as I'm designing them to check how they're going to look on, iPhone 5 to iPad Pro, small size Android, large size Android. It gives you a good feel of how things are going to be. It's the best. This is the best tip I ever learnt from doing mobile development back when I was doing Xamarin. It doesn't count though how it looks in the debugger. It happens all the time. That issue that Duncan was saying with the slider works fine in the emulator on your machine, but when you've really got to, so every feature, like that's why I run. So what I'd do now if I was creating this, the very next thing I would do is I would jump back out to my command prompt and I would go Ionic upload. And what that's doing is that's actually going to do a build and push it up into the Ionic, up into my Ionic account. Now, if any of you have got that Ionic View app on your phone, so you can literally come in here, you can install Ionic View.
Maybe you want to share it.
Oh,
you have to, yeah, you have to.
No, you don't need. Oh,
you'll need an account, I think. Yeah, you'll need to sign up.
Oh, you'll need to sign up. Even if you don't, I can give you the key. Basically, if I give you that string,
I think it's further up in the console, isn't it? Before where you chose it at.
I'll bring it up on the screen. If anyone who wants to add it wants to go in, I can bring it up in here. This is the one you're after, the BNE one, C49. So if you go, once you've signed up and you've got the app open, if you hit on the ellipses up in the corner and just go preview an app, then you can add the string for anyone's app, even if it's not from your account. So I'll come back and show. I'll keep going with the demo, but I'll come back and show that code again for the team that is still installing it.
It's an impressive app.
Yeah, yeah. You can just look on. The app's not going to be that great. It's more about the process.
But it's pretty cool that you can put it on everyone's phone so quick like that.
Yeah, but it's like that process when you're building Xamarin, or especially if you're building native, to be able to build the shell of an app that actually has. If I go and have a look at the app, it's got. I'm going to go back to something that I can see. I stopped it running. So that app actually has a menu bar, has a home page, very basic functionality. But I can go in there. It's got the menu up the top. I can go to the home page. I can navigate to a list view. You can see that list view scrolls. When I click on one of the items, it navigates me into a sub list. Just worth calling out. See how I'm on the next P? I'm on a Nexus here on an Android phone. It's just a little back arrow as the styling. If I was to change this and say, show me what this would look on an iPhone, this is just one of those examples where you'll see now I'm actually getting iPhone styling. So when I navigate into my list and then into a subpage, I now get the back button and the arrow because Ionic is automatically, when you use their widgets, it's automatically styling for the device type that you're using. So I'll go back. So I've got a super basic app here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in a contact list. I'm going to add a new page in. I'm going to create a list of contacts and just go through and have a look at a couple of little features. Has everyone got the Ionic preview app installed that wants it installed? I'll just bring that code up again. So if you want it, you go up into the ellipses, you go into preview an app, and then if you type in that code, you'll be able to get a hold of my app.
Those Cordova warning messages in the emulator, do you worry about as much?
Depends on what they are. I think everyone's got it. What was the Cordova error messages?
Just saying Cordova's
Yeah.
not available in the browser.
Yeah.
You'll often have those because, like, as soon as you're using any of the plugins, like a barcode scanner and stuff,
Yeah.
you're going to get.
So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go in and I've run it. I'm going to go and create I'm going to go and create another feature. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to use the terminal here, actually inside Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say ng generate. I'm going to say ng generate. I'm going to generate a page. Oh, tell what I do all day, every day usually. I'm going to come in. I'm going to say Ionic generate a page, and I'm going to call it the component list.
Company list.
I'm going to call it company list. That's why pair programming is good.
This is how I like it. I just sit here and backseat drive.
This is how it works too, whether it's presenting, coding.
Pretty much.
Okay, so that's gone and generated a page called company list. So you see here under source pages, there was the home page, there's the list page, and now it's gone and created a company list page. So in here, I've got the company lists HTML. I've got the TypeScript file, which has all the code in it. I've got the styling, and then I've got the module as well. Actually, something that's different is it uses Sass by default. In Angular, you've got to use a flag to tell it to use Sass.
And you could, or less. We've just been using Sass. So I guess it's worth pointing out here, if this is the first time you've seen this, you'll see it like when you're coming from Angular, it looks exactly the same, except the big difference is the router. The router is completely different.
That's it. So instead of using pages and using the Angular router, instead of using components and using the Angular router, you've got the concept of pages.
And you navigate between pages on a stack.
And when you have a look at these pages, you'll see that it's injecting a nav controller into each page. And we'll see, I'll go and do that when I add my page in. We'll actually do a little bit of basic navigation.
But it looks very similar. Like and Ion View did load versus
Yep.
NGO, and it almost goes one for one across.
Yeah, very similar.
Can you do deep linking into ionic app?
Yep, can indeed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to add the page, the company list page that I've added into this menu here. So to add it into the menu, I'm just going to come in and what I need to do is I need to include it in my app module, because what I'm going to say is I'm going to say that that page, which is the company list page, is an entry component. So this is an idea that to be able to load this page as one of the root pages, I've got to specify it as an entry component, and now I've included it in that module. So what I have the ability to do now is, I can't remember where they put the.
By default, though, it creates a lazy loaded.
It does have lazy loading by default, but no, by default, those initial ones, it actually puts them into the app module for the entry components for their navigation. This is probably the more advanced one. So we don't do it this way, is because we use the lazy loading. So for people who are doing, actually it's probably worth calling out for the people doing Angular, every page has its own module so that it can lazy load each page one at a time. When you do the navigation, you navigate via, there's two ways of navigating. That's in the component. When you do the navigation, you go to the nav, which we're injecting up here. Where are they injecting the nav?
View child nav and stuff. Is that where they're getting nav?
Yep. And then they're going set route. So the way that navigation works in Ionic is different to Angular. So essentially think of it as a tree. So you have something that is a root page, and then as you navigate to each subsequent page, you're essentially pushing things onto a stack. So and then you're pushing pages onto the stack, and then what you have the ability to do is, as you go deeper and deeper, then you can pop things off the stack, so that then you move down the stack and back towards the root. And then there's different ways you can pop. So you can pop straight back to the root, but essentially that's how the navigation is working. Is you're saying, this is the root page that's going to be right at the very beginning, and then navigate through a stack as I add new pages in. So this is setting the root page. It's setting it by actually hard coding and passing a component object to set root. To be able to do that, you actually need a reference to the component class itself. And just the way that lazy loading works, if you're passing the actual component class, you can't do lazy loading because it needs to have a reference to that JavaScript file, which means it needs to be included in that bundle. This is probably more for the guys who already know Angular and are curious around how that's working. There is an option though, if you want to do lazy loading, exactly the same as very similar to how lazy loading works in Angular, where you can just navigate by a string. So in the Angular router, you can pass a string in that tells you a module to navigate to. You can also do navigation by passing in a string in the navigation methods in Ionic. And that gives you the lazy loading ability. But we're not. That was a bit of a tangent probably for the people who are. Yeah. No, but it's worth calling out.
Putting it into the app module, it's like, but if it's lazy loaded, then you don't need to do that. But yeah, that's.
So this is out of the box.
I don't think they have anything set up out of the box yet for the lazy loading. When you generate at the moment, though.
Yeah, it creates that module.
When I generate, it creates the module, and if I just navigate, if I was to do a pop and if I was to push, do a lazy loading push from somewhere else, we might play with this afterwards. If I was to go into the home component now and do a push and just push this by name, it would automatically navigate to that page and lazy load it.
Yeah, like you could just change your root, like in your app, you could just change it to the one that you just created, just as a string. Like for the home page.
Yep.
And it would lazy load it. That's correct.
Yeah. So it's all very similar concepts. It's all under the covers. It's still doing the same stuff as Angular. They're just using some different routing. So I've gone and I've created a company list page in the up in my app component. there's an array of pages to be shown, and this is why. So by default, they're not lazy loading them. But I could come in here and so they've got this pages array. And what they're doing is they've got this pages array, and then on the view, you don't have the switcher, Shift Alt A?
Should do. I don't think it works with.
Oh, it doesn't work on that app component. Yeah, it works with Ionic. It just for some reason not the app component. And then what they're doing then is in the menu, they're iterating over that to actually output the list of pages. So if I go and have a look, did I make a typo in here? No?
Didn't show up.
Come right then.
No, but that's all right. I think it just needs a reload. Yep.
That's the reason why I don't have autosave on mine.
Ah.
Save all of them once already because this keeps compiling and compiling and compiling, and sometimes doesn't refresh.
Yeah, sometimes it's.
That's the only
I've actually.
reason why-
It never happens in Angular, but Ionic sometimes gets stuck
Mhm.
halfway
Yes.
through an
That's
autosave.
the only reason why
And I don't
don't
understand
do
why.
autosave.
Yeah.
Do you do autosave in your Angular code?
I used
Outside
to.
of- you used to, but
in
now
Ionic-
because of this.
In Ionic, no.
Yeah, I have it a fair bit, but I still like the autosave. I just make a little
It's
change and
nice, yeah,
kick it
it's
off
nice,
again.
But this one just goes nuts all the time.
Yeah.
I don't have that much trouble with it. There are some times where it's,
Yeah.
I have changed something and it hasn't updated, and I've spent hours
Yep.
working out
Exactly.
Yeah.
that all I needed to do was run it again.
Yeah.
Working
I
fine.
stop and start all the time. I'm like, oh, that's not working. It should be right.
Yeah.
Stop it from running. And it is still, if you're used to writing back-end C# code, this is still definitely more of an art. Like what I've said it a few.
JavaScript-y.
It's I've said, you know, Angular and Ionic. It's taken, because I'm a real programmer. I've been a back-end programmer for nearly 20 years. And what I like saying is that Angular and Ionic make front-end almost feel like it's real programming. Upset some people in the audience. Anyway, it's tongue-in-cheek. I'm going to push on. So I've gone and created this page. So we can see that was pretty easy for me to go and create a company list page, put it in the menu. The next thing I'll do is I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to quickly put in, I'm going to kind of motor through a bit. I'm going to come in, I'm going to create a models folder. Inside my models folder, I'm going to create a company interface. So I'm going to create an interface called company. In the company, I'm going to come in, I'm going to put a name in, which is a string. I'm going to put an email as a string. I'm going to put a phone as a number, just to have something that's a little bit different. Okay, so I've got this company interface. I'm now going to jump into my company list. And usually we'd go out and we'd come and talk to a database. But I am going to come in and I'm going to make a list of companies in my class. And I'm just going to populate it with, I'm going to say I've got a list of, I'm going to say I've got companies, which is an array of companies. So I'm going to import that. And now, oops. And I'm going to add load companies as a method. And when I load companies, I'm just going to populate that companies array. With a couple of companies. I'm going to say name Microsoft. And I'm going to put in an email. Okay, just a little bit of dummy data. Okay, so I've created a load companies method. So IonView did load is the method that gets called when the view loads. So the constructor executes whenever you instantiate the class, and then once it's actually rendered, it'll call the IonView did load, and it'll load up the companies. I can actually now just jump into my view for this component. Yeah, so So just the shortcut keys. It doesn't work on the app component in Ionic, but it works on all the others. Don't know why.
Maybe it's user error.
Could definitely be.
Could be. No, I don't know. I might have some. I'm always changing extensions.
Yeah. So this is a little different. If you're used to working with Angular, you'll notice here we don't have HTML in our. So this is the view for our company list. You'll see we don't have HTML. I can come and put HTML in here, but what I'm getting is by default all of the Ionic components. So, and the components are really well documented. My only complaint about Ionic components, because they're excellent, is the fact that they chose to call them components, because as if components wasn't already an overloaded word in this for this field. So the Ionic, I have this page open all the time. So the Ionic documentation is awesome. They go through, they list, here's all of the components you get out of the box. You go in, you choose the component, it'll give you a look. Oh, I don't know why. The internet's still the internet here is not super fast. So it gives you some basic documentation. It'll show you what it looks like on the phone. You can actually tab between the different UIs and it'll show you how the UIs change. So the documentation on the components is excellent. And I have this open 20 times a day checking. And then, so this is probably a point if you're just getting into it. This is kind of the beginner's documentation on this page. If you go into the API docs, then for each, so if I go into the buttons and then go into the API docs, it'll give you the full specifications and much more information about that particular component. So what we're seeing here is that we've got a header component that's getting rendered up the top, and then your Ionic content is what's rendered down within the actual page that's being rendered. I'm going to just tidy up my company. I'm just going to call it companies. Put a capital letter on it. Ooh, there we go. That's not how you spell it. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down into the content and I'm going to put in a company list. Oh, actually, what I'm going to do first is you will have noticed on my Ionic app, when I'm in the home screen and when I'm on the list, there's this nice little hamburger button up the top. I don't have that in company, so I'm just going to jump in here and I'm going to add that in. So in my Ionic header, I've got the Ionic nav bar. That's got a title in it. What I want to do is inside the nav bar, I also want to put in a button. I want that, so I'm going to put in a button for the little hamburger. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say that that is an Ionic button, and it's going to toggle menu toggle. It's going to toggle the menu. Oh, your Emmet's not working either.
No love.
No, that one does.
Right.
So I'm going to come in here and put in a little button that's going to. Oh, it's weird. Sorry. Does anyone else use Emmet?
Yeah. Usually it's fine.
Yeah, I know. And
Jumping machines.
Jumping machines.
Similar sort of problems. It was broken for one on Insiders.
Was it? Oh, there you go. Maybe.
Don't run Insiders on.
Someone else's machine on a code demo.
Yeah. So what I'm doing here is I'm just coming through, and what I've done is I've put on an Ionic button. Oh, your formatting Shift-Alt-F isn't formatting that right either.
You should open it in staple one.
Yeah. So I went into the header. I've put in a button. I've put on the tag to say that this button is actually an Ionic button, and what it should do is toggle the menu. And then inside that, I'm just putting in an Ionic icon. So I've got a button that contains an icon, and that is going to toggle and turn on and off the menu. So you can see now, because it will have already been rebuilt, when I go into company, I've now got this button up the top that's going to toggle the menu. See, it also does something funky with the styling. But I'm going to push on and actually get the code written. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to come in and I'm going to put in an Ionic list. So I could have just come in and done a div, And I could have come in and done a div, and using the Angular's ng4, I could come in and do an ng4 and say, for each company of companies, come and output me the company.name. If I'd have done that, that will go and render when I go into my company list. I get my 2 companies being output. But what's a better thing to do is actually lean on the ionic components. So I can come in here and I can say, instead of doing that, I'm going to come in and make that an ionic item, and I'm going to make it a sliding item. And I'm going to embed that in an ionic list. And I'm just going to move that line down. So what I've got now is I've got now I'm starting to use the ionic components, and I'll start getting some nice ionic styling when I do a refresh, and sometimes have to do a stop and a restart.
Sliding list actually has certain things that you need to have.
I need to have in the other ones.
Can't remember what they are,
Items,
but
sliding. Oh, I've got to have it inside the item. Yep. So because I've made it, I wanted to make it a sliding list because I wanted to demonstrate that you ion item options. What you get out of the box with Ionic is awesome, because this would actually be really hard to do. Is I can come in, I can put a button in, I can come and put a delete button in, and I can make that button red. Okay. So I've come through, and instead of it just outputting text now, it's actually going to be outputting it using the Ionic item as it's a list of Ionic items. Okay, so it's now going to be styling it on Android like Android and on iPhone like iPhone. And because I made it a sliding list, I automatically get this functionality where I can start dragging, all of this built-in functionality that the phones have. I get that out of the box, and I can wire that up, in just a couple of lines. I've added in that native looking styling. That as a designer, as a guy just writing HTML, that's a fair bit of work to try and put that together to try and make it look that slick. So it makes it super easy to build apps that look like they're native. There's a couple of other things I'm going to do. I'm just going to come through, I'm going to put a search bar in, just to demonstrate how easy it is to put something in like a search. So I can come up in here and I can come and put in I'm going to quit here, and I'm going to kill it. I'm going to go code. Yeah. So before I was running Code Insiders, which is like the very aggressive. There's 2 versions of Visual Studio Code. There's Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio Code Insiders, and Insiders ships a new build every day. So it's kind of and that's the one that's the one we run day to day, living on the edge. But obviously, sometimes when things are going, things weren't quite working for me in that demo. So I thought I'll flick back to the more stable one. What's your?
You got to click on it, maybe. Oh, you get no love out of my machine today.
Your machine hates me. There we go. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. So I'm in the company list HTML. Okay, so in the company list HTML, that's what I was going to do. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to put in a search bar. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to try this again, ion search bar. Yeah, that's better. So what I can do is, what I was trying to do before is you can see ion, so Actually, I'll just do it that way. So when I put a search bar in, so this is going to put in a search so that I can search through that list of companies. I can come through here, and you should see that should have already when that updates, what I want to be able to do is, I did have a list of companies. What I want to do is be able to easily filter that list of companies. So I can come in here, and the search bar gives me some really easy properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the code for this component. And I'm going to give this component a search text. So this is, I've only got an array here, so it's going to be a pretty easy search string. So I'm going to create a search text. I'm going to create a method for just filtering these companies out. So I'm going to create a search companies method. And the search companies method is going to take us that'll do for the moment. So I've got a method for searching companies and a search text. So I can come in here and I'm going to do a banana in a box. So I'm going to do a model binding to the search text. And I'm going to say, whenever anyone types in here, go and call my search companies method. And pass it the parameter that is in search companies. So if I was to jump back into my search companies, I'm just going to update this dot search companies. Companies dot. I'm going to filter it for the item dot name. So this is a very very simple search text. So I've just put a very simple filter in. This dot companies. That should do it. Better? I want to make that phone a bit bigger. So I'm going to come into company, and you can see now I've got an iPhone style search box, and I can come in and I can actually, as I do my filtering. Oops. My filter didn't work. I can actually go and do filtering. So I've gone and got an iPhone style search box and dropped it straight onto my form. It's worked all of that out, it's rendered it for me, and I've got some very easy events that I can handle. Obviously back in my component, I'm not going to be filtering an array. I'd be going and calling my service and doing all that kind of thing. But you can see it's super easy to drop components on and start building apps that look native. If I actually if I flick this over now, so that's what it looks on an iPhone. You can see it's got the little round cross. It's looking very native. I flick across and say, what does it look like on a Nexus? Got to refresh the screen. And just drilling home that point again, now I've got an Android-style search box, Android-style grid. Super easy to wire all of this up. So I'm having a little love affair with it. It's so easy to put apps together that work really well. Just composing apps with that list of components is really, really nice.
Ionic components with gestures as well, like swipe left.
Yeah, so all of the gestures and things, like doing that would have been a real pain. Like I wouldn't want to.
Yeah. So if you get this at the moment, so the question was more about the swipe. So like if I was to pull this up on the phone here, I could just swipe in from the side and it'll pick that up.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So you can see that with the.
It actually.
Well, it works with the menu. So if I'd have jumped into the menu, if you swipe in from the left, that's the old version. It's the one that's running. If I swipe in from the left, it's popping the menu out. My production app at the moment is using the slider component. This is the one that I actually had a bit of a bug with. But when you go into the components, this slides component where it gives you the tabbed interface and you drag things across. Yeah, so all of the touch, I can't quite do it with the mouse. All of the touch stuff works super easily if you're using the Ionic components, because that's kind of what they built it for. Yeah, super nice. Look at time. Yeah, do you want to do the? Yeah, I think they're the important bits.
We talk about it together.
Oh, yep. So actually, I'm just going to quickly hit that demo took. So probably probably do the code reuse.
Yeah, so we'll
We've
jump
reached
onto the
points about
last.
the App Store. Yep.
So talking about this last point here about how do we get code reuse or take it to the next level. So one of the things we're trying to leverage is the idea that, we don't, not only do we get code reuse across like iOS and Android, but also trying to get code reuse across the web apps that we have to see how much of the code there we can share. So if you begin that story and have a look at it, in the Ionic stuff, you have to make components and views for those. You saw there was all this Ionic markup, like Ionic content and Ionic. It's very Ionic specific. Same with all of their widgets. You're not going to be pulling those widgets into the web app. And all of the routing as well, because the routing is completely different. It's this stack that Adam was talking about. And in Angular, that's going to be the same. The component and the views are going to be specific for the web app. They're not going to have the Ionic stuff in there. The widgets will be whatever you use, be Material or Bootstrap or custom. And then the routing, again, is going to be completely different. But where there is an opportunity to share code is in the middle. So any of your Angular services, which includes basically any of your reusable logic that's not bound to the template. So that could be authentication services, for example, or HTTP requests, the classic stuff you see in an Angular app is someone will make a service that has a get opposed to put and a delete for all of those CRUD actions. But then there's also a bunch of state management you can start considering if you're taking state out of your views and putting it into a state management container. There's also an opportunity to share that across the front end and the back end. So then you could start talking about sharing some of that state of the data. So your components are getting kind of even less and less work put into them. So rather than them doing any sort of manipulation of the data, they just get exactly the formatted data that they want for the app, or shared state. There might be layout state. So if, knowing if they need to open or close the menu, that's not something the component will do. You might be able to put that in a state management container, and we'll talk about that in a sec. And same like auth state. So the way we've been looking at doing this is with NGRX, which is a state management container. So before we jump on, I guess we should talk about that very quickly. Who's heard of NGRX? Okay. Have you guys heard of Redux before? So the idea of having an actual single source of truth in your application where you'll put a state like you'll say, I have a single JavaScript object and this object holds all the state for my application, and then we can ask it for the current state. Like, so what's the current state of our users, or what's the current state of the menu? Is it open or closed? So we've been using that quite a bit in our web apps, and we're looking to use it also in our Ionic apps. So the way we're going to leverage that is through NPM packages. So if we were to have a service that's going to have this get, post, put, and delete, and we're going to have an NGRX store, then we'd put that into an NPM package. And that NPM package means that if we use it in the web app, then we pull in that package. It will be a private one that we only have. And then we would also pull it into our mobile app. So the great thing about that is there's no duplicated code. If you've ever had the joy of getting a PBI or a task that says, go look at the commits from the other projects and then implement in this project, it's not very fun. And super
Copying
buggy.
and pasting is what I do best.
If you know where to copy and paste from, because it's often across 10 files as soon as you're talking about state management. And then someone extends one and not the other. So this can really help that problem, just having everything in a single repository, because you won't want to, you're unlikely to reach into an NPM package and change it just for that project. And then also you've got version changes for all of that stuff. And it usually means higher quality. It usually means you can invest more in it because you're going to get more use out of it. So the NPM packages is definitely the way to go. Whether you did or didn't use NGRX, putting the services at least in an NPM package is definitely a great way to get shared code reuse. So there is a library that we've been using that helps with this called the Generator Angular 2 library. And this is supposedly coming to the Angular CLI in time. I don't think we're going to see it too soon. But there's all this talk about the Angular CLI becoming an SDK and all these other things, which I think we'll see in the next 6 to 12 months. But at the moment, this is the one that everybody's using. So you basically, you get that. It's a Yeoman generator, so you install it on your machine, and it's got a command line interface as well, kind of thing. So you'll say, make me a new NPM project that's just for Angular, and it makes you it with some demos. And then you go in and write the component or the service that you want, and then run the command again, and it'll make you the NPM package. And you can link it to the other environments and stuff. So that's one way of doing it. And once you've made it, then basically, if you would have something like this, you would import an FBC module, and you could name it whatever you want. But we've got this Fire Bootcamp idea today. So I would import that module, and then inside you just import it like you would any other third-party module or your own module. And then you've got access. So in Angular, you've got this idea of a module, and it's just a list of dependencies, be it components or services or other modules. So here, when you import our custom module, FBC module, which happens to be in its own NPM package, then we have access to all the stuff we want to put in there, like the shared code. So it's pretty simple to do and set up. So that's one way around it. And whether you do that with NGRX, which we'll talk about now quickly, or not, is up to you, because that's a pretty big investment to decide to go with a state management container. And I think for us, if you're in love with it, but you're very easily excited. And I'm excited. I love it as well. I think it's amazing for a complex app, but it might not.
We've got a whole talk.
Yeah, we've got lots of stuff around
on
it. Yeah.
NGRX. It's so the idea of it is building large apps gets very complex, and NGRX itself is complex, but it simplifies your complex app.
Yeah. And I guess what I want to say around it is that for a mobile app, it might be a little overkill because you don't have as much state to manage with just one small view, and you do get a chance to go in and out, but it can be great. It is fun, and it's nice in there. But when you go to the web app and you're sharing that logic, then you get a big benefit because the web app's usually going to be a lot more state to manage, a lot more complex, or can be.
You know why I like it? Because I've been thinking about this. Because we talk about this stuff all the time. I like it because you've got this. As you go deep, I find that as I'm going up my tree of pages and things, on one earlier page I'm making a change. And so for the guys who haven't heard of NGRX, essentially all of the data... Yeah.
Let's say what NGRX is, and then you can get excited. Okay. So NGRX is a way of implementing the Redux pattern for Angular. So it's a pattern that's not just popular in Angular. Also, Vue has a pattern using Vuex, and then Redux has the actual Redux library. But Redux is really a pattern for state management. So for NGRX allows you to do the Redux pattern for Angular, and it's the main library for doing it. But the difference in the way that Angular uses it is that it supercharges the Redux pattern with observables through RxJS. So it's the Redux pattern for Angular, but it heavily uses reactive extensions for JavaScript. So if you were to do a really fast fly-through of what it would look like, you've got a single store which you put all the state for your application, be it the state of the data and the state of the layout, for example. So I might have a single JavaScript object that's got companies array and a contacts array, and that's all the state. But I could have another one which would be layout, and that might say menu open or menu closed. So it's just easy to rationalize about because it's just an object. And when I want to get a piece of that state or a slice of state, I can select it. So the component could ask for, say, just the company's state. And then the component has that state. But rather than the component then going and updating that state, say I wanted to delete a company, rather than it talking to an Angular service that would then go delete the company in your backend and then get the successful response back and then manipulate that array of companies right there in the component, the component gets dumber, and its responsibility is not to do that. Its responsibility is just to say, somebody else, can you please do some work for me? So it would dispatch an action, and the action would be delete company in that example. So the component no longer doesn't know how to delete company, it just knows it can ask for it. So it would ask to delete a company, and this action would have two things, a type and a payload. So the type would be what you want to happen, and the payload would be the ID of the company in this example. That's being listened or picked up by something called a reducer. And the reducer is the only place you'd change state in the redux pattern. So this reducer would take that action and the current state and then make new state. But that's the simple version of it. What really happens is you would talk to something called an effect. And this is another part of the NGRX library. So effects is one of its sister libraries, and that manages side effects like HTTP requests. So the effect would listen for this delete company. It would communicate with the service. If it was successful, it would dispatch a new action. And if it was in success, would be a delete company success action. But if it failed, it would be a delete company failure action, and it would be somebody listening for that. But ultimately, they all end up in a reducer usually. And the reducer then takes this action and the payload, and then it takes the current state of the companies and creates new state. So the current state would have been 2 companies, but now it got past this action with the company ID to delete. It would go through and delete the company, make the new state, and then updates our original piece of store. That's a real whirlwind tour of this. Normally we would say it a bit slower and a bit more long-winded. But
we've got a whole talk just on that slide.
Yeah. But the idea of this is the components get super simple, and to the point where they don't do very much, and you get a lot more components where they're just saying, can you go do something for me like delete a company or get companies or load companies? And also you might go, can I get companies by this contact? So normally that would be a request where you would have to go make HTTP requests, call 2 different services, or maybe one service that just gets that directly. But maybe you've already got that state there, you already have contacts and companies. So the component can basically go get both those pieces of state and do that work there. But then you can get even smarter where you say, well, I'm going to make my component even one more level dumber, and even when it asks for state, it asks for state to be kind of mapped for it or projected into a new piece of state, like a specific list of companies by contact relationship. So in that case, we're trying to make our components dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber. So when you get it right, a lot of your components are just view logic, and they just say, hey, store, can you give me companies by contact? And then that's it. So in your web app, you can do the same thing and say, hey, can you give me it by, and then you can try and share as much logic as possible.
So in my example where I had companies and I was doing a search of the companies, and if I was doing a delete of the companies, what we'd have done traditionally in Angular or Ionic is have a company's property like I had, and I'd have a lot of that. Most of that logic would exist in that component. But now I'm breaking it out, and I've got a company's effects, I've got a company reducer, and a company actions file. And all of those things are coming together, but the component has almost nothing in it.
Yeah.
The nice thing, there's a whole lot of nice things about it, and it means that instead of keeping the list of where those companies are in that component, it means that that list of companies is stored in the store. What's great about it is that as I navigate up and down my call stack of my pages, and I navigate between pages, if I select a page or I delete a company or I do anything like that, because I'm updating the store, all I'm doing is I'm hopping onto the next page, and I'm not loading anything. I'm very rarely loading things as I navigate up that navigation change. I'm just changing the store, and then I'm just binding to stuff straight from the store, and the state is already where I'm expecting it. So I'm actually find I'm very rarely loading things or updating things. The other real benefits is because we've moved all of the logic out of the component. Remember Duncan said, like when we start to share our code, what we're doing is we're going to have our Angular app, which is just going to be the views, our Ionic app that's just going to be the views, and then the NPM package. If you're using NGRX, now all of your logic is in effects, reducers, and services and models, and all of that can go into your shared NPM package that's then shared with your other 2 apps. So it really maximizes your code reuse, because now you're sticking none of the logic in the bits that can't be shared. Yeah. And the other thing is that now your unit testing, all of the logic that you're doing all happens in reducers, because reducers are the only things that actually update the store. And a reducer is a pure function that only accepts a type, which is essentially a string, and a payload, which is an object. So it's very easy to do a unit test over a reducer. There's no dependencies, there's no mocking. So all of a sudden, all of your unit tests become heaps easier too.
But there is an overhead to implementing it.
Every check-in, to change the check-in to search for customers, I'm checking in 8 files.
Because you have to go, that's the big, I think I have it on the next slide.
It's in our talk.
It's in the talk, it's not in here. But yeah, basically one of the big downsides to the pattern is a lot of boilerplate, and also making sure you follow the pattern. And it really ramps up. So at first there's just a lot of boilerplate and the benefit's small, but as the app gets more complex, the benefit just goes more and more through, because like any abstraction, once it's in place, it's easy for everybody to follow.
But once you get your head around it, you're like, oh, everything's tidy.
But if you put me in a conversation and you said, okay, we're going to make a new Ionic app, and my first question would be, is there going to be a sister web app, or is the web app, if there's no web app, then it's easy, we don't have to worry about shared code. But if there's definitely going to be a web app, then I would be very, very much fighting for an NPM package. Whether we used NGRX or not, I'd be much more open to say yay or nay. Just because of the overhead that you're buying when you implement that. For not just you, I'm comfortable with it now, I wasn't before, but the next new team member has to also get up to speed with the new pattern as well.
That's actually the worst thing about NGRX, is that everyone on, like, I don't mind the boilerplate, I don't mind because the complexity once you learn it is awesome.
Yeah.
The downside is that everyone on the team has to be across it.
And they have
Like
to agree to follow the pattern.
Yeah.
If they come up with their own, if they go, oh, I've got a better idea than the
No!
pattern.
We do it. We do
Yeah,
it.
so yeah, that's pretty much how it is.
No.
That's how it should be.
No.
Yeah. So if someone
Don't you think it'd be better? Like, no.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely the big downside.
Batman slide.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can see I'm much more jaded than you. I've been burnt a little harder on it. But the NPM package stuff is quite trivial to do. I recommend doing it from the start. As someone who's been burnt from the other side, where we've had 4 versions of the same thing in 4 apps, then the NPM package I think is a no-brainer, and it's trivial with that library. It's a bit clunky to set up sometimes, but not too bad.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, and we're aware some of you are probably on lunch breaks and things and need to get away right on too. We'd love it if you have time to fill in the feedback form. Oh, have
Yep.
you got more?
No, I was just saying, it's just a summary of that section. And then what we covered today. We covered, the landscape of enterprise mobile, from native to Xamarin to React Native, Ionic, and PWAs. We had a look at Steve-O's amazing demo, and we had a look at code reuse.
And we talked about shipping to the app stores. We didn't get to do that demo. I can show anyone who's interested afterwards, but I know some people have definitely got to leave it too. But the moral of the story is, with the same way that we did at the command line Ionic upload, you execute commands at the command line that actually just take your code and push it up. When we registered that thing, it pushes it up into their service. You've got to do some jiggery pokery with certificates and things, but then they actually build it for you and you download the file that can be deployed. But that's what we've covered today. We hope you guys have all really enjoyed it. I've got so if you do have time to fill in the feedback forms and have a chat, we're not running away. But we'll wrap up because we know some of you are. But thank you all very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you at some of our events in the future.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You don't get a card, Barry.